Great. Okay, good. Hi, Lauren.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to see you. I'm just waiting for it to kind of load up here and just get people to come and join us. We're there in the group, which is great. Just got to make sure I press this little button here. Oh, there you go. And then we're good to go. Oh, great. Well, it's great to see you, Lauren. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. There's been quite a bit of pre-interest in our conversation. I just want to start by saying, or giving a bit of a trigger warning, I guess, just to start us off, because obviously, just because of the nature of the conversation tonight, those of us, I include myself here, who have lost very precious, beloved animals in recent times, it might bring up some emotions for you. So I just thought I'd say that at the top of the hour here. But we've got a great conversation lined up today. You know, Lauren, it was quite funny really, because I've been following you for a while, mainly because of your aTTouch work that I'd seen you originally. And then you put a post mentioning Cockington, I think, or something. Oh my God, that's near me, that's near me. So I messaged you. And then you and your lovely wife, Helen, you've moved just down the road. So we are proper buddies. We've done afternoon tea together, haven't we? And we're going to be doing Santa's train together. Christmas kayaking's next on the list. So it's really good. And we've had some great conversations. And my husband, I'll be talking about this a little bit later on. My husband's an end-of-life nurse in a hospice. So he was really fascinated when we're going to be looking at some of the content in Lauren's book, The Eternal Gift, which is a great read, and it really touched Kieran. So it's great for us to meet in person and discuss some of the things that we're going to kind of talk about today. Because of this, what I'm going to try and do, everybody, and I'm not very good on the tech, so you'll have to bear with me, but we'll see how we get on. We've got loads of people saying hi here. Oh, Robin Hood said hi. I know you and Robin.
Lovely. Hello, Robin.
Yeah, and June and Margot and others. I'm not very good at doing the tab, but I will try and work it as I go through, because I was thinking at the end it'd be quite nice, maybe the last 20 minutes or so, to take some questions from the group. So if you've got any questions, hold them back a little bit until a bit later on, and then I can, rather than me have to scroll back, I can have a look at them. All right, have a look at them. So Lauren, before we come on to the main topic of this evening, which is your fascinating work doing animal communication and what you do as an animal communicator, but also how you educate about it around the world, and also referencing the book. Let's go back in time a bit, and let's think about your own origin story and how you came to work and have a connection with animals in the first place, because obviously you've got a very illustrious career in lots of different areas working with animals. So tell us a little bit how Lauren started in these with animals.
Well, thank you. I don't know how illustrious it is, but yeah, you know, I actually spent 21 years of my professional life as a marketing person, traveling the world doing marketing things. And, you know, to cut a long story short, back in 1996 or 7, my wife, Helen, and I moved to the United States so I could spend some time with my dad. And unfortunately, he passed shortly after we arrived in the country. And we happily took in his Malamute, who rather quickly developed some health issues. She was 10 at the time. And I'd always had an abiding interest in animals all through my life. And what I used to do was donate my marketing expertise to organizations, you know, like World Wildlife Fund and the Donkey Sanctuary and Fred's Turtle Farm. I mean, you know, just to help them raise money. But I really wanted to do something more hands-on. And when Rue the Malamute started to get older, she became a little bit reactive in that way that sometimes older animals and people can be when they're feeling a little sore, less confident, less comfortable. And she began to be reactive around other dogs. And somebody told me about aTTouch, and I'd never heard of it, but it sounded interesting. So I called the local aTTouch practitioner, who was Debbie Potts. And Debbie, many of you know who Debbie is. She's a fabulous aTTouch instructor and my best friend and business partner now. Anyway, she taught me, kind of got me interested in aTTouch, and I began the practitioner training. And I loved it so much that I actually quit my job as a marketing director and kind of moved into following my heart, which is now I'm in my late 30s, you know, and when you get into your 30s, you're kind of thinking, what do I really want to be when I grow up? You know, what do I really want to do? You know,
I'm still thinking that now, Lauren.
Well, yeah, there's that. But we have many incarnations of adulthood. So I absolutely loved being a aTTouch practitioner. And anyway, as Rue's life went on, she developed hemangiosarcoma. So that's a very aggressive cancer. And she was 12. And the vet said, you know, she needs to have her spleen removed and she's got this mass on her chest. But, you know, she's basically in good shape. So I think she'll survive the surgery. And I remember very distinctly thinking to myself, wow, I wish I could get her input on this. Because for her to undergo this surgery and the recovery and everything else, I'd like to know if that's something that she's really up for, or does she, as they say, not have the fight left in her? So a friend of mine in California, you know, California, a lot of crazy people, told me about something called animal communication. And I thought, that's weird. But okay. So I hired a professional communicator who was very, in my opinion, very good. And I found the conversation very helpful. And I didn't have any bias going into it because I was very open to whatever Rue wanted to do. But she said that she was up for the surgery, and so I that, and on the advice of the veterinarian and my own intuition, we went through. And she lived until 14 and had a great quality of life. But by then I was really fully immersed into working with private clients, working with animals. And I thought, you know, I think it would be useful if I could learn how to do this animal communication stuff, because it seems to me, like you, Andrew, I'm very interested in animals as individuals. And it's one of the things I love about aTTouch, right? Because we meet the individual animal where they are at any given time. And to be able to talk to animals, to be able to find out how they feel or what they want, what motivates them, or why they're doing a behavior or not doing a behavior, I thought, you know, why don't I try to learn animal communication? Well, I understand the skepticism out there, because my impression of animal communication was Madame Zenda wafting onto a stage in a caftan and a turban, carrying a crystal ball and making pronouncements in some sort of an Eastern European accent. But I started to investigate what it might be about. And, you know, my journey was basically that I ended up kind of teaching myself how to do it. And from there, I went on to continuing to teach aTTouch with my friend Debbie in Asia. We work pre-COVID, we work Japan, China, and Taiwan. And a lot of my animal communication work is based there. A lot of my books were first published there. Are they more open? I don't know. Maybe it's just a different experience. So, you know, that's kind of how it goes. And then, you know, to be honest with you, I wasn't particularly, when I started teaching animal communication, which I've been doing for about 20 years now, obviously I started when I was very young. I wanted to understand better about how it might work, because I'm a logical person. I too wanted to be able to get a handle on how this might work. I wanted to be able to at least have a discussion with people who are a little bit skeptical about this kind of stuff. So I started to, believe it or not, I don't have a strong science background. I have a small one. I started to talk to people about quantum mechanics. And actually, I did end up talking to 2 or 3 quantum physicists about how animal communication might actually work. And I'm not going to bluff your guests here with us tonight. I'm not a quantum physicist, but it has to do with quantum entanglement and the sending and receiving of particles and waves. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here quickly, just a little sort of silly graphic from one of my books. I just wanted to give kind of a potted version of how I think that this is all kind of working. So if you think of yourself like a satellite dish or an antenna, and you are sending and receiving information. Now, from a quantum point of view and this non-local communication, this can come in the form of particles or waves. And of course, with we're talking about telepathy here, and with telepathy, distance is not an issue. It doesn't matter how far away it is. And the same thing would apply to quantum entanglement when it goes across universes and planets and stars and things like that. So distance doesn't have anything to do with it. But basically what's happening is information is hitting your satellite dish, and it's being scrambled in a way that you can understand it. Like your TV works in the same way. So, you know, a TV signal is sent and then it's descrambled in your satellite box, and there you are watching it on a screen. To make this a little more tangible for people, I'd like to look at it from the human point of view. I think what's being sent and received actually is the intention behind the words. In other words, I talk to animals in countries where I don't speak the language. So how come I can talk to a dog in China or South Korea or wherever else it may be? Is there some kind of Star Trek universal translator out there? I don't think so. But I think what is being sent and received is the intention behind the word. Now, if you can imagine a time in your life when someone has been talking to you and they've been smiling at you and saying something nice and complimentary about you, but actually you could feel that they didn't mean what they were saying, maybe even that they didn't like you. What you were really picking up was their true intention. Or perhaps you can think of a time when you went into a room and you could just tell that the couple in that room had been arguing. You know, we talk about reading the mood in the room. Maybe you can feel when someone behind you, you have the feeling that someone's looking at you, right? And you turn around. There are a lot of experiences that humans have. You can chalk them up to coincidence if you want to, but they're so frequent, these kind of things. Or thinking about someone you haven't thought about in a long time, and out of the blue, they send you a text message or something. And so we have these kind of experiences that I think are all part of this receptivity, this information, this intention that's hitting our satellite dish and making a connection. And that's basically how animal communication works.
I think that's a really great, and it's an easy thing to kind of visualize, I think. And I think this is why it was really important for me for us to have this conversation in the group, because like you alluded to earlier, you know, some people, might come from a more skeptical place, and it's really interesting to hear that you started that. And I think that's really interesting. But I know there are many people who are really interested in this and actually have taken a lot of comfort from having animal communicators come and work with them. Mm-hmm. But I also know some people who have had that but haven't fully understood about what might be happening. And I think trying to look at it in these terms and also to create something that is perhaps more of a tangible connection can actually be really helpful, especially from a visualization point of view about what it is that might be happening there. And a lot of people want to make connections and make an understanding on more of a spiritual level, Lauren. And I think that's what this really connects to, I think.
I think so. I think so. And, I kind of see it this way. In human terms, again, we talk about people having hearts and minds or body and soul. We hear that pretty often. And the implication there clearly is that we have a part of us that's just our physicality, and we have a part of us that is our soul, our spirit. Some people believe a part of us that lives on after death. I mean, if you fall in love with someone, you're falling in love with their totality, with who they are. It's not just about, how cute you are. I mean, that's great, but it does wear off after a while. And that's the same thing with animals. We love them for who they are, and the deeper part of them, as well as just their physical side of it. When we do animal communication, we are actually connecting not just with the furry body or the feathered body. We are also connecting with, if I may say, the higher being. You can call it the soul, you can call it the heart, you can call it whatever you want to, but that's what I'm talking about. And so animals, like people, go through life integrated, body and soul, right? We don't just walk down the street with our physical bodies and then have our soul or higher being trailing behind us like a balloon on a string. We're very much integrated. And as we mature and change and go through life and gather wisdom, hopefully, then who we are changes. And that is not just an intellectual process. There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I think that they're processed on different levels. And it works the same way for animals. So that when we do animal communication, we can reach that different level of animals. We can find out who they are as individuals. And they are capable of very deep, very complex thoughts, just like people.
I think this is the thing, isn't it? I think if as an individual, to start this process, there has to be an element of openness, the openness to the thought of more. Because when I think about spiritual, for example, for me, spiritual is connection through the other. Something that is not necessarily physically manifest, however you want to kind of see that. And I think if you can be open to at least having a belief or an awareness of more, then all these things start to become possibilities. I think this is what I found in my own journey of kind of becoming more open to thinking about more. I got called in to a case a couple of years ago with a local animal communicator who'd already gone to see them and then realized that they needed some behavioral input. And that was quite a challenge, Lauren, because I was like, right, I don't want to dismiss this other person, but I'm coming in as a behavioral professional with all my things that I do. But actually it ended up being a really rewarding and humbling experience all round, because the most important two individuals in that story was the dog and their caregiver. And the caregiver was very invested in having a spiritual connection with their dog and being able to look at what that brings in. So I think that's really important. So when we think then of your own story then, Lauren, and you thought, right, do you know what, I've experienced this, I feel that I am open to more because of your own experience with Rue and the animal communicator. How did you then go about finding that you had that ability yourself? That's one question. And secondly, I guess, which is a supplementary question, if I'm going to ask that, is do you believe anybody can do it then? Or yeah, did you tap into something that you felt, oh, I didn't realize I already had it?
Right. I think there are two kinds of stories that you hear about animal communicators. One is the kind who grew up talking to butterflies, from childhood. And then the other people are the people who learned it through practice and application. And I was the latter. I had no background in this whatsoever. And I absolutely believe that animal communication can be taught and learned as a skill. And that's how I approach it. I approach this like people learning how to play the piano or any other skill. It takes practice. What I've done is to use a lot of neuro-linguistic programming as techniques to help people. So there's some science there to help people get out of their head and bypass a lot of that brain chatter rather than meditation, which I think is great, by the way. But meditation is very challenging for most people. So I use NLP quite a lot. The techniques that I use, I'm not talking about hypnosis. I'm really talking about guided imagery that helps people get themselves, to a deeper, quieter place where they can hear what animals are saying. So do I believe anyone can learn how to do it? Yes. Now there is a caveat though. The truth of the matter is, with diligence, anyone can learn to play the piano a little bit, but not everyone is going to be a concert pianist. And so I see it being like that with animal communication. Some people use it just to the degree that they want to connect with their own animals or their friends' animals or family, and that's absolutely beautiful. And then other people use it in application of their professional work with animals, whether it's dog trainings, rehab, veterinary, whatever it may be. And some people are just animal communicators. So I think there's room, there's a spectrum there that can accommodate anybody who's willing to do the work to practice. And it was hard for me to learn it and to teach it to myself. I had a hard time. I did not come by this easily. I had to really practice.
So I'm really interested in what you said there about this notion of, as a first step, really finding ways to remove the chatter, to remove the clutter. And I think we're really good at that, right? I think even just on a human psychology point of view, a lot of our kind of challenges are because, there's just so much going on all the time. And it actually has provided, and I think many can agree with this, over generations, we've had a disconnect from the world around us because of that, actually, and the lives we have. So that is a challenge. And I guess also when you first start off, especially if you're somebody who is feeling their way through into it, not having that part of the brain that wants to come in and say, no, that's just silly, no, that's just silly, no, that's just silly.
Right.
What are the kind of I know that's probably a big part of the education, I know, but what kind of techniques did you find helped with you to kind of allow yourself to be open and not allow that part of your brain that wanted to dismiss it? Because our brain is kind of designed to look at something that is foundated in what it classes as a reality, even though often that reality is not bearing any resemblance to reality. Of course, that's just the way that things are. So how do you navigate that? It's
a tough one. And I say to my students, the biggest block between your being successful with animal communication or not is your ego. And the ego is just a tremendous part of this, because our ego is there to keep us safe on all levels. Now, that includes not stepping in front of a bus, but it also includes not looking foolish to ourselves or to other people, or perhaps being afraid of, making a mistake and that kind of thing. And the techniques that I teach, and it took me a couple of years to develop them, and I've honed them as I've gone through my decades of doing this. The techniques really are to trick the brain and the nervous system. I talk a lot about the nervous system, the brain and the nervous system, into believing that you are somewhere else. May I say, a deeper place. I call it the heart space, where you can escape the chatter of the brain and the judgment and the opinions and the biases and the filters and everything else. And to do that, you have to learn to be neurologically and if I may say, sort of intellectually, somewhere else. And I teach people how to create a space that involves the nervous system, because the brain doesn't know the difference between doing something and very clearly imagining it, right? We've known that for a long time. And so I employ that trick. There's a bit of trickery here into tricking us into being in a deeper, quieter place.
And I think that's well, that's a really helpful skill to have anyway, Lauren. I think.
I think so too.
I do think, and I think also this notion, you know, I remember seeing something on telly a little while ago. It was a documentary, and it was a guy who was really had a real connection with birds, right? And this guy come along in a very intellectual way, talking about this connection and everything else. And the guy just looked at him and he said, well, forget all that. Just be with them.
Yeah.
Just allow yourself to truly be with them, and then they'll connect with you. And I thought, and that hit me, this notion of just truly being. How often do we do that, even with ourselves, let alone
Right.
with our animals and things? So when you started to build that confidence up, then did you first start your animal communication with animals that were alive and present, or was it more that you were able to connect to those that had passed?
No, I absolutely did start with animals who were, alive, present. I really did. I'll be honest with you though, and say that I'm a person who intellectually and spiritually has always been interested in some of the mysteries, if you will. You know, I'm okay with the fact that we can't explain everything. Not science can't explain everything. You know, we're still discovering subatomic particles. I mean, and I'm okay with that. And so even though I can, of course, talk to animals who are alive, my specialty is talking to animals who are dying or who have died. And that's what kind of led me into writing The Eternal Gift, because let's be honest, is there anything more painful than pet loss? I don't, for a lot of people, no. I mean, it's excruciating, right? We have this unconditional love, bond, and connection with a being who's all of a sudden not there anymore. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult.
And I think this is why it's such a comforting book. It was when I read it, especially because we've had two great losses, really. Bertie more recently, but before that, Milo, who is my soul dog, really. And I'm still going through that. And he passed quite a few years ago now. But it's just really, I think, from the conversations that you have with animals that are detailed in the book, it really gives a picture of, often, not always, a situation where the animal is ready, but the human just really isn't. And I think there's a bigger story here for us, and that is the taboo around death.
Right.
My husband works in a hospice, and you know, that's one of the things that as a institution, as an organization, they're trying to counteract this notion, the taboo around death. So it must have been when you were able to start making those connections then to those animals that were not well, that were coming to the end of life, those animals also that passed over. On a human level, Lauren, that must have been tough. Because it's almost like, because you were not just doing something quite remarkable in many ways for most people, that making that connection, but you're also getting a window into a truth that you hadn't had any preparation for.
Yeah. Though I confess I've had a near-death experience, so that helped. But you know, I think that one of the biggest differences between animals and people, and when I say animals, I'm talking about animals of all species that I've spoken to, irrespective of geographical location. So I'm not just talking about companion animals, but I've been very privileged to travel around the world and talk to animals all over the place. And they tend to have quite a unity of mind about the perspective on this kind of stuff. You know, I make the joke that, you know, animals have a spiritual, not religious perspective. It's not that cats are Catholic and llamas are Buddhists. You know, it's just not, but they do have kind of a unified perspective on this in my experience. And I think one of the biggest differences between most people and animals is that whereas most people, not all, most people are afraid of death, animals are not. They are, however, afraid of suffering, and they are very sensitive to the fact that our companion animals anyway are very sensitive to the fact that they know that we are suffering as they are dying or as they are sick. Animals say things to me like, you know, I can see the sadness in your eyes. You know, it's a phenomenon sometimes that you hear that cats or dogs will leave home to die. Do you know what I mean? They'll run away, they'll go missing. It's not an unknown phenomenon at all. And when I've tracked down animals to talk to them telepathically about that and ask them why they left the home, sometimes they'll say things, I couldn't bear to see the sadness in your eyes. I couldn't bear to see you in pain. You know, I was ready to go. It was really hard for you to let go, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that perspective is really the predominant one, you know, that they're not afraid of death. But please counter that too, because that from the human side, that makes us feel bereft. Okay, you're not afraid to die. Good for you. And here I am, alone and suffering and missing you. And to kind of mitigate that a bit, I think to further the animal's perspective, it's that they really do believe that the connection between us is eternal. That's why I called my book The Eternal Gift. Okay, I know that sounds very convenient. And I'm not talking about the Rainbow Bridge, which drives me crazy. It's not about, you know, rainbows and butterflies and that kind of stuff. But animals really do believe that there's an energetic connection between us that lives beyond physical death. Again, that takes us back to the comment about the soul and the higher being. If I talk to animals who have died, then clearly I am talking to that part of the being that survives physical death, okay? And so scientists will say energy never dies, it just changes form. And so animals believe that that energetic connection is still there for us. Yeah, it's really different. Absolutely. And does it make us feel all better? Does it make us miss them any less? No. When my animals die, I cry along with everybody else.
And hearing you talking there, you know, I just love how you communicate, Lauren, and how you frame these things, because you can't help but connect to it. And I think this is not really anything that is new in many ways when we just think about how most cultures around the world have been built upon some form of religious doctrine regarding other, about how we get to be part of other some other day, and what that might be, and how many of us, you know, I lost my mother and my father relatively recently, and I still feel a connection. I still feel most people talk in those terms. Some people do have a view, and it's a valid one, that end of life is end of it, period. But I think anybody who can consider more, all of this starts to become a much more rich conversation to have, and the different experiences that people have, and it allows people to talk about them, Lauren. I know with there's a great book which I'd really highly recommend to anybody who's interested in, you talked about near-death experiences earlier. It's called Near-Death Experiences by Dr. Kelly Satori. And she started off as an NHS nurse here in the UK, and she got funding for a 5-year study into doing a kind of a report on near-death experiences. So it wasn't like to prove afterlife or anything. It was just purely an exercise of, right, you've come around now, you're claiming to have a near-death experience. Let's catalogue them. Let's see what's going on. She started as a skeptic. The book is amazing. The similarities with the stories, regardless of culture or religion, was remarkable. And she ended up on a personal level, being convinced that you know, we just haven't worked it out yet. The other stuff, science is way behind, because science struggles with the here and now, let alone anything else. I think we can all agree on that. But the biggest conclusion that she made, and she wanted anybody involved in healthcare and especially end of life to read this book, because from her point of view of 5 years of really meticulous study all over the world, she ended up going to other countries in the end, not just here in the UK, that death was not something to fear, that death was actually inherently quite a peaceful and beautiful process once it starts. And it's interesting from my husband and other professionals who work in end of life, how there is this kind of correlation universally that those who seem better prepared mentally, physically, emotionally for the coming of their passing generally have a more peaceful death than those who don't, where that death ends up being more difficult. And you talk in the book about how animals tend to be more aware of trying to get that right combination where everything's in that right place.
That's right. Yeah. And they have a concept called golden time, which I love. I absolutely love golden time. And, you know, basically it's a time when you've reached a point in your life where you're physically, you've done what you need to do, right? You know, whether you've done your job, whether it's helping somebody in their work as a dog or, you know, whatever it may be, you've physically done what you need to do. You're mentally prepared, you're spiritually prepared, and you can enjoy this golden time when everything is just sort of, you're reaping the harvest of everything that you have sown. One Icelandic horse said, "I'm in the golden space between completing your life's work and going home. It's like a grace period where you can just relax, enjoy, and basically bask in your time on earth without responsibility. This is a sweet time."
That's beautiful. And that notion of going home, it's something that comes up a lot with a lot of the readings that you share in the book.
Yeah.
This notion of going home, and again, this is something that within the hospice setting gets said a lot with people in those final hours. Even my mother, who was she was pretty out of it. My uncle and auntie had come down to see her. This is in the same hospice where my husband now works. That's quite a profound connection, really. And she came round. She was lucid. She said hi to Uncle Graham and Aunt Sylve, and then she said, "I'm going back to be with Brian," which is my father, who'd passed a couple of years before. And then that was the last word she said, and it was very peaceful. I think this is the thing, you know. So, Lauren, when we think about this, I've just noticed actually in the group here that Trisha's asked about what might happen for a particular case, for example, or, you know, how it might work and how you get involved. Could you perhaps share a case with us, one that you think about where you got involved and what you did as the animal communicator, and how that was able to help, whether that was about decisions, clinical decisions, or behavioral decisions, or whatever it is that might have happened?
Yeah, I mean, in this context, sure, you know, it kind of, there's my coming in, and I don't do private clients so much anymore, but there's my coming in at the point where the animal is transitioning. In other words, they're sick and the person's or the family is making a decision, you know, perhaps to euthanize or not, or what does the animal need, or even, you know, what's your pain level like? Are you getting enough pain medication? Do you need more? Is there a particular kind of food that you want? Is there anything that you would like to do? It's a little bit like talking to a person, I think, who's passing. You know, is there someone that you would like to see? Is there somewhere you want to go? And even, is there someone that you'd like to be there when you pass? But the euthanasia question at that point, you know, I usually explain it to the animal like, you know, would you like help to leave your body when the time comes? And then I'm really careful because animals don't know what euthanasia entails. How could they? They haven't been to vet school. And so what I do is I have a little, if you will, a little kind of a movie, an internal movie, if you will, that I show them about the euthanasia process, and I find out from the person, will the vet come to your home? Will you go to the clinic? You know, their paw will be shaved, and then there'll be the insertion of the catheter, and so on and so forth. And so I show them a movie about what the euthanasia process looks like. And I let them know that if they choose that their choice is final, you know, there's no going back. And then almost inevitably, if the animal is ready to go, they'll ask for help to leave their body if they can't do it themselves. If they're not ready, which is absolutely, I hear that, no, I'm not ready to go yet, then my next question is, and how will I know when you are ready? Because we've all been in that position. Is today okay? Would tomorrow be better? What about Wednesday? How about morning or afternoon? How do I know when it's the right moment? And of course, this is torture. But for animals, they have, it seems, a certain window in which it's okay to go. In other words, we talked earlier about the fact that they would be physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually ready. Let's say those things are starting to coalesce. And then the other factor is us. Are we ready? Right? So there's 5 things really. So those things are starting to coalesce and line up. And they usually have very clear guidance about how we will know when they're ready to go. And let me just say here that a lot of people rely on the eating, not eating thing. This is not always a good clue. Yes, sometimes it is. But you know, eating is a biological imperative. You know, we've all had experiences, those of us and you know, or the people listening today, we've all had a lot of animals, and sometimes they'll eat just right before they're ready to go. It's just a biological thing they do. They enjoy it. It's part of the joy of being on Earth, or they feel physically driven to do that. Yeah, sometimes animals stop eating, but I don't use it as the primary criterion. I have a checklist that I've developed for my students and for people that incorporates, you know, the opinion of the vet and the animal and the person and all the rest of it, because I think there's so many factors that come into being. Sorry, but the animal can tell us, you know, when I do this, or when I do this, or when I don't do this anymore, or when I don't do that anymore. Sometimes they talk about, and this is something that your husband, Kieran, will have experienced so many times, because it's the same with people. You know, the light will go out in their eyes. It's like there's nobody home, right? They're not present. And that's, you know, that's a real clue. Are they gone more often than not? Just to finish the question, if I'm asked to become involved after the animal has passed, and it can be, I like to suggest people wait at least 2 weeks after physical death, because it gives the animal and the person a chance to get used to a new way of being. Then often people have things that they want to ask and say about, you know, how reflective, you know, how was your life? This is what you meant to me. Or they may want to know, what was our purpose in being together? Did you learn anything? You know, there's so many different kinds of questions that we can ask. And sometimes, to be honest, people have an element of guilt. I'm not saying it's justified, but sometimes people feel guilty, like, I wish I'd taken you to the vet sooner, or if only I had done this or that. And of course, we can only do what we can do. And animals are very understanding of that. It's not, oh God, yes, you know, if we'd gone to the vet on Wednesday, it would have been fine, but it's not how it goes.
I think that's the comfort for those who want to be open to thinking that there is something more for all of us, that actually, you know, there's a saying that Kieran uses, that we only get one death. with where we are now. And sometimes that can go well, sometimes not so good, sometimes some part of that process goes wrong. But ultimately, that's just the transitional bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I'm guessing for you're saying that animal is any more or less happy once they've made it. It's just that maybe it could have been a bit less bumpy for them, perhaps. Yeah. And this is an interesting thing that Jack's story in the book brings up, this notion of because medically it's such a difficult topic, isn't it, Lauren, on many levels, I know, but because we can physically, medically, clinically keep a body going. From Jack's story specifically, he was spiritually ready to go, as in, on an internal level, way ahead of that time. But also, I think what is reassuring again is when we think about Darcy's story. Darcy's the horse, right?
That's right.
Yeah, right. What was Darcy's friend, horse friend?
Angel.
Angel, yeah. So Darcy, when you spoke to Darcy and Angels, this is an interesting bit in the book for me, because of course Darcy had passed and Angel was left behind, and you were able to speak to both. But the Darcy, to be able to communicate that, hey, it's okay, we'll be together again, and I'll just be here doing my thing until that happens. And then to get that same feedback from Angel, which is like, I'm going to miss my friend now, but I know we'll be there'll be something else down the line. I think that can bring a lot of comfort, I think, even knowing that for us when we lose really beloved companion animals.
Yes.
Or any animal in our life. Some people have more than a companion animal, especially some of my colleagues who live in different parts of the world where they connect to animals around them, even wild animals that come to visit them regularly, that they have a connection to. So it's not always companion animals, but most of us have an experience through a companion animal.
Yes. And you know how we say in human terms, when you meet someone, we say things like, oh, I felt like I'd known them all my life, or I felt like we'd met before. There's a lot of this kind of recognition. But of course, we hear people use that in connection with their animals too, don't we? We have all had many animals in our lives who we have loved dearly. But let's be honest, and you referred to your dog as your heart dog. I completely understand it. Everyone out there will. We love them all. And there are some animals, as there are some people, with whom we have a deeper connection. Now, the animals would, because they believe in reincarnation, they would talk about the fact that we'd probably been together in past lives, right? And of course, many people believe that too.
And do you find with this, what you do, bear in mind we're an animal too, that you've ended up talking to humans, or even a human who might be alive, where you end up connecting to something that is more subconscious for them than actually what their own conscious thoughts might be, or people who have passed on, or people who are in a non-communicative state, especially end of life. Has that blurring ever happened for you?
Yes. Humans, first of all, let me say, no one should be afraid to invite me to their home for dinner, because I'm not going to sit there reading your mind. So humans have much denser psychic defense networks. I mean, we really are averse to having people wandering around our head uninvited. So telepathy is much more difficult with people. But to answer your question, yes, I had an aunt who died of Alzheimer's. I mean, what a cruel disease, is it not? And she got to the point where she didn't recognize me and could not communicate. And at that point, I'd flown down to California to see her, and I was sitting by her bedside, and I wasn't getting anything out of her. And I thought, I'll try telepathy. And I was actually able to connect with her on that level, and it was very reassuring to me that indeed there was somebody home there, at least on that level. the brain and whatever consciousness is supposed to function through the brain was no more. That mechanism no longer worked, but the higher consciousness was present.
Lauren, it's flown by, isn't it? I want to just say, if anybody's got any questions, now's the time to pop them in. I'm going to scroll back a little bit because I know Margot's asked something here, and I think Beverly and a couple of others. So I'm just going to have a look back. But now's the chance just to pop a couple in, and then I'll have a scroll through. I just want to reference the book again. It's called The Eternal Gift. There's so many. They are literally conversational pieces, Lauren, because they are in there, that covers lots of different things, lots of different aspects of this. And I've got loads of things that I wanted to kind of touch upon, which we didn't have a chance to talk about, but it's in the book. One thing a little bit I just wanted to touch on, and that was Lady Jane's story, because this is something I think that people can really struggle with, and especially colleagues in who I work with in rescue, who have very young animals come in and they don't make it, and it just seems such a shame, because we feel that, if we look at it on a very just three-dimensional, I guess, level, what life was taken at an early age, and the way to the kind of lack of ability for that animal to have found some story in its life. Lady Jane was a young kitten, 7-week-old kitten. Devastating for the caregivers, of course. Tell us a little bit about Lady Jane and what you connected to there, because I think this is something that brings some comfort again for those who want to be open to it.
Yeah, this is kind of a tough one. The Lady Jane was part of a litter of kittens. I think there were 5 of them born, and they all had severe birth defects. And by the time the people who were taking care of this litter of kittens were clients of mine, and they asked me to come over and do what I could, and I did some aTTouch on them, and made a telepathic connection with them. And I think that at that point, 3 of the 5 had already died, and the people were just, you can imagine, they were just devastated and suffering mightily. And I connected with this Lady Jane. She was about 7 weeks, and she did die some short time after this conversation. But basically, I learned a huge lesson from her. Basically, what she said was that even if it's a short life, I'm going to learn about being my best and doing my best. And I'm going to try to be here for as long as I can. And that's enough. And the big lesson that I've learned from Lady Jane and from young animals who have died like her, and this is a big one, is that for animals, it's not about how long you live, it's how well you live. That's really significant. It really is about quality of life and the experience that you have while you are here on Earth experiencing this life. And she felt like, she knew she was going to die, and she felt like, that's okay. I've had this tremendous experience where I have built my strength and my spirit and my will, and I've learned something from this, and it's okay. Wow.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing, isn't it? Because as humans, we tend to value life based on longevity,
particularly in the countries that I work in.
Quality. Yeah.
I work in Asia primarily, and it's all about how long you live. And, in Japan, I've been on euthanasia panels to try to educate people with animal welfare people and vets about euthanasia, because there in Japan, particularly, euthanasia is not so common, more so in Taiwan and China. But, it's really about how long you live, and changing this perspective to look at the quality of life rather than, there's more to life than just breathing. there's more to being alive than just breathing. And of course, Kieran, in hospice, he sees this too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I know Kieran was really touched by the book and having the chance to speak to you as well about it. Right, come with me. I'm just gonna have a little look through here. You have to bear with me, everybody, because I'm not very good at this. But so Tricia, we touched on that a little bit there, Tricia. I think Caroline, I think Kieran did that for us. It's just a lot of people sharing a lot of things actually here, more than questions actually, which is really great.
Great.
June's answer something. So here, Margot, is the let's read this out as is. Okay, two questions. First, is the experience of an intense impact of a core feeling that a dog in the distance is trying to tell you something? So I'm guessing when you're out walking, rather than reading as dog's behavior in the distance, an indication that there is more to this conversation. And two, do they stay for a while? So Schloshism, I'm not sure what that is, sorry about that. 30 days before elevation, a religious belief of mine. I wrote about this the day after she passed. I was on a spin bike and allowing tears as the light in the room was low, and I was thinking that maybe I had released her. Suddenly I saw my Carly running and bouncing next to the bike. I could feel her there and looking up at me joyously in the way that she hadn't been there able for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple of things there. Sorry if I didn't do that justice there, Margot. It's difficult on my screen to kind of read it properly.
No, but this is a great question. I'm going to take the second one first. I really want to validate for people, because there are going to be so many people out there who have experienced what they think after their animal died, they think that they see their animal or smell them or hear them or feel them jumping up on the bed at night and walking across the duvet. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories I've heard about this, people experiencing their animals coming back to visit. And they do. Animals talk about being around their people, usually for around 2 weeks. And they do this to help them with their transition from one, shall I say, place to another, but also to let us know that they're okay and to make sure that we're okay. And so if you experience something like that, and Margot's example was really, really nice. If you see a flash or hear or smell something, take it, take it, experience it, take that as your animal being with you, of perpetuating that eternal connection. And then the first question, I think, was about behavior, and I see an animal doing something. Please let me tell you that I have a really strong code of ethics, and I never, ever talk to people's animals without their permission. So, for example, if I'm walking in a park and your dog is running around being perhaps a little bit naughty, I still wouldn't dream of making a connection. And I have an on-off switch, and I teach my students to have an on-off switch. I know it sounds charming to do the Dr. Dolittle thing and hear bluebirds and worms as you walk down the street, but actually it's quite crazy making. So you want an on-off switch. You want to be able to talk to the animals you want to talk to and then switch it off. For my own animals, I leave my channel a bit open, but for other people's, no, it's a closed thing.
Right, Beverly asks, wondering if Lauren's communication with animals who have passed on ever reveals that the animal is now able to communicate with humans who also have moved on. I think it would be a very natural thing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Animals believe that, again, this is not a religious perspective. Animals believe that there's a place that we all come from and a place to which we all return. Now, there are different, it may be segmented in different ways, but it is not at all uncommon for animals to talk about people who have predeceased them, or, your mother who died, they saw grandma, or that kind of thing. That doesn't mean that they're going to hang out with them for eternity, but often they encounter them.
Emily, hi Emily. Emily's a great vet. I love Emily's work. And it's great to see you here, Emily. Hi Lauren, Andrew. Thank you for this. I'm a vet and I really tried to feel my way through a euthanasia. And as I'm explaining what I'm going to do, it is as much for the owner and the animal I'm caring for. And I think that's really important. I think even end of life care, which is something my husband is really passionate about, and he does a lot of great work educating others on that. Kieran will talk to them still and let them know what's going to be happening, and and just share that. But so I think that's amazing, Emily. What more can I be doing? What more can vets do you think? I think talking things through actually, and having that and slowing that process down, I think it can become a little bit, even so, maybe I don't know, but even something as challenging as euthanasia can become a bit task driven, I guess, Lauren, sometimes, rather than just giving the time to slow things down and talk to the animal.
And I recognize that for vets it can be tricky. For sure, I've had vets who've had my book in their waiting room. I think that if you're comfortable doing it, and I think as a veterinarian you can frame it as coming from your own experience, which would be authentic, I'm sure. I think the concept that animals are not afraid, because a lot of the reticence from the people side of letting go, completely understandably, is for their own loss, their own pain, but also concern for the animal. Are they going off into some cold and lonely void somewhere? And because the person may have their own fear of death, this then gets put on animals. And I think it's worth, mentioning to people that in my experience, in your experience, that animals don't exhibit behavior that would indicate a fear of death. That the death with the animal is generally one that is very peaceful, something that they are very accepting of. And I think that might help a little bit, the lack of fear.
Let's go on here. So Tricia, and hi Tricia. Do you think you are interpreting what they say or what they are thinking, or are you trying to find meaning? That's quite a good question. I like that.
Okay. So we, as humans and animals too, form judgments and opinions and have filters in our head. This is where this happens. So when I'm teaching people to get into their heart space, I refer to it as a neutral space. Because if you are outside of your head, which is the only place that telepathy can happen, you can't do telepathy if you're in your head. You've got to go to a quieter place where you can hear the animals, which is why most communication teachers teach it through meditation. I don't, but that's why most people do it. You got to get out of your head. Therefore, by definition, if you are out of your head and in a deeper, quieter place, you are in a neutral space where you are not allowing your own opinions, judgments, or filters to get in the way of what it is the animals are saying. So it's a very good question. And I think, I think that this speaks to the ethics of the whole thing.
And that's a really important thing. You've said that a few times. And I know that when we first start talking about these things, regardless of other people's views on the topic, you as an individual, the ethical consideration framework that you work in is hugely important to you, Lauren, hugely important to you. And I think that needs to be celebrated. Tima says, how do you know whether what you are receiving is accurate and not wishful thinking? I worked as a reader for humans for years and of course received feedback.
Yeah, well, obviously people usually comment on what I've done. I've been doing this such an incredibly long time, but I teach, when I teach students how to do this, I have them practice with other people's animals specifically so that they can get validation for what they pick up. In other words, if I ask my own dog, describe the room you sleep in at night, well, I know that. But if I ask Andrew's dog, describe the room you sleep in at night, Andrew's going to be able to validate what I've picked up or not, because I get it right or wrong. And so as the learning process goes along, I really encourage people to, in fact, and I have practice groups in different countries and things like that, where they can trade, they can trade animals, so to speak, and talk to each other's animals so that you can get that validation. And so for me personally, I obviously went through that process for a long time. I was terribly afraid of being a charlatan. I didn't take money for 3 years before, I really wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing, and that I wasn't tricking people or wasn't just doing stuff in my head. But so often animals say things that surprise me. There's no wishful thinking, because I have no attachment to the outcome of what they say. Why would I? If I'm talking to your dog, Andrew, I have no attachment to what they say to me. They say what they say.
Yeah, I've got and I think just on a personal level, I've got an amazing friend, Jan. You're listening in today, Jan. I know you were hoping to, but Jan is somebody local. I think you'd love Jan, Lauren. She lives locally. She does animal communication in a very natural way. It's not her main job. She just has a gift for sure. And I remember being up at Jan's field where she does some dog work, and a lady came back on a horse, and she was like, oh, thank you, Jan. What you said last time I saw you, I did the change, and now I'm doing it, whatever it was. And it was just so just natural. And I think this is the thing, there's so many people who have a real, with Jan specifically, it was just a natural gift that she kind of gifts to others. And there are and the thing is, she's a really good mate of mine, Lauren. This is the point. I think when you meet somebody who you know well, and then they share that gift with you, it just seems to really hit home. Then I think that there are many people who can engage in this way with animals, and it comes very naturally. Some people, like I said, some people that anybody can do it. Some people can do it to a point, other people can do it very well. And I guess some of that is how we do our own disentanglement because of our own kind of blocks and that kind of thing. Right, let's have a look here. So we've got my thing here. I believe I have a friend, I'm guessing that's an animal friend, Melody, flashing around my house. I haven't had any communication yet. Should I ask for this one to go on to the other side without finding out why my house is where they are now? So that's an interesting question. In your experience, do you find there is a place that isn't quite over, that is still connected somehow, or is that not what your experience is?
Yeah, well, kind of not really. So, sorry, Big. We spoke a few moments ago about animals who are around us for a certain period of time before they move on. It's unbelievable in my experience, and I can only speak to my experience. In my experience, I have not encountered animal ghosts, animals who are, stuck and can't get on the other side. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying this isn't something that I've come across very much. It's interesting because I was in Japan when the big earthquake happened a few years ago, and many people and many animals were killed. And I ended up going back, well, I've been going forever, but I ended up talking to a lot of the, to some of the animals who died in the tsunami up in Fukushima, because the people had survived and they wanted to make connections with their animals. And there was talk in the Fukushima area about, because Japanese do believe in ghosts, there was talk about, the animals who were stuck there because of this trauma and this tragedy and that kind of thing. And I'll just share with you, for what it's worth, what my experience was about that. And that was that animals were in that place experiencing the trauma and trying to help the animals who were left behind emotionally. In other words, so an animal passed on, but they hung around to try to give support to the animals who were still there suffering, wandering around this desolate land with basically no people and no homes. And then gradually, as time went on, the animals who had died moved on. And I talked to a number of animals at that point, and they said that, you know, when the earthquake happened and the tsunami happened, when they looked down at that area of Japan, it was like it was gray. It's like it was covered in a gray fog with all of the souls and the beings who were trying to sort themselves out. And then as time went on, and I continued to make connections with these animals on behalf of their people, they talked about how the mist was breaking up, that they could see the land now, and that everyone had kind of moved on and sorted themselves out. And I think that's one of those incredibly powerful, traumatic global experiences where, you know, the usual order of things can become disrupted or stalled.
Sure, and it could well be for Melody there that that whatever it is that she is sensing or feeling that is in the home is just the presence of an animal that comes to visit.
It could be.
Say hi.
And, yep.
Right, I think we're gonna have to kind of finish it there, but thank you for everybody. There's some great comments in the group chat actually, Lauren, so it might be worth having a look afterwards. And I think I know we've had there have been two types of listeners in tonight, I guess, that those who already take a lot of comfort and feel a sense of validation for this topic, and those who might be a little bit more skeptical, who have come and listened in. I think that's a great thing. And I think what we've got to recognize is many people get a huge amount of comfort from employing an animal communicator, connecting to the stories that they hear from animal communicators. I know your book, which has been published in, I think it's 4 languages now, isn't it? 5 languages, a bestseller in its own right. People do get comfort from it, and I think what I love about how you talk about it, Lauren, it feels accessible. It doesn't feel detached, if that makes sense. And that's an important thing, I think, especially for people who want to. One of the main reasons I wanted to have this in the group tonight was not only for those that I know already kind of have a connection, but for those who are feeling something more, that want to hear about this kind of story and want to hear about these things, so they can make their own mind up about things and they can decide what their own paths might be for them moving forwards, you know. And of course you do education all over the world for people who want to learn more about animal communication.
Yeah.
You do much in the UK, in Europe, US?
Well, you know, these days it's a lot of Zoom stuff, but I'm thinking now that I'm in Devon, I'm thinking about running a UK-based class, so that would be great. So if I may, I'd like to just give my website, and people can connect with me there or on Facebook. It's www.integratedanimal.com, like the sign behind me. You can email me there or find me on Facebook. But yeah, I do a lot of Zoom-based classes, and would love to do more.
Well, I'll make sure that link gets put into the great. I've got that there. I'm just going to pop that in the chat there. There we go. I'll pop that link into the chat there, and I'll make sure we share it as part with when this goes onto the YouTube channel. What would you like to share with us then, Lauren, as some final thoughts before we say goodbye?
I think just to hold the animal's perspective, that, you know, they really believe that the eternal connection that we have, the love that we have, does survive physical death. And because we have this really deep connection between us, it forever changes who we are and who they are. We are not the same after we have this connection. And the part of us that is changed by them is forever changed. And it's a beautiful thing.
It is. Well, what a great sentiment to end on. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you.
The next time I see you, we'll be in a kayak, hopefully.
It will.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Lauren and her lovely wife, Helen, have persuaded me and Kieran to go out kayaking, so we're going to give it a go. Perfect. Andy in a wetsuit, that'll be something for people to relish, I'm sure. But well, great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for tuning in this evening. Let me just double check something here. Oh, let's have a look. Yes, oh good, yeah, brilliant. So the next chat is next Friday. We've got the lovely Jill Briner from Dog Decoder, the brains behind the Dog Decoder app. We're going to be looking at reading body language and communication and the importance of that in regards to good dog advocacy. So that's a great conversation. The following week, we've got Kathy Gregory talking about free will education. And also that week, we've got the lovely Tracy Bind coming in talking about zoo pharmacognosy and other topics. So we've got a good few talks coming up. Thanks again, Lauren, for this evening. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, and have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.